What would you do if a ragged kid, mud on his face, hair wet with dew, held out a gold chain? Not for money, but to trade for a loaf of bread? That morning, the wind sliced through the quiet street. A boy stood outside the bakery, jacket too big, sleeves torn, mismatched shoes. His collar was stiff with cold, both hands stuffed deep into his pockets like he was holding himself together. His face was streaked with dirt, eyes red from the wind. But in his hand, something shimmered. A gold chain, simple, worn, with a cross pendant, and on the back, barely legible, were the words, "Luke, always come home." The boy looked up. "Ma'am, I don't have money, but can I trade this for a piece of bread?" His voice cracked, barely above a whisper. Sophie leaned down to hear him. Then she saw his fingers, raw from the cold, nails rimmed with dirt, yet holding that chain like it was all he had left in the world. She froze, looked at the boy, then at what he held. It didn't add up. A child like this with something like that? Her brow furrowed. Was it fake? Was it stolen? The boy caught her hesitation. His shoulders pulled back just slightly, not angry, not defiant, just scared. Like if she didn't take it, there wouldn't be a next option. "It's real, ma'am. I swear. It's my dad's. I didn't steal it. And it's not a toy." His voice cracked, not just from the cold but from pride on the verge of breaking. A golden necklace, from a boy whose shoes didn't even match. But it was spotless. No scratches, no dirt. Sophie looked again. His face was smudged, but his eyes crystal clear. She glanced down at the name on the back. Luke. Her fingers stopped, not because she knew the name, but because of how he held it, like it was the last piece of home he had left. She didn't ask anything else, just slid the pastry across the counter, softly, but with certainty. "This isn't something you trade. It's a memory. And the bread? I make that for people who are hungry." The boy said nothing, just carefully tucked the necklace back inside his torn jacket, gently, like folding the only photo he had left of someone he loved. He picked up the bread, his hands trembled, the first bite rushed. Crumbs fell across his shirt. He chewed so fast he nearly choked. Then a quick gulp of water, not because he was starving, but because he was scared. Scared someone might take it away if he didn't eat fast enough. Sophie stood there, didn't say a word. Just turned away, so no one could see how tightly she was clenching her hands. The next morning, he came back. Same coat, same broken shoes, same quiet posture. No necklace this time, just a pair of eyes, quiet, grateful, and unsure. He paused at the doorway, hesitated, as if unsure whether he was still welcome. And when he finally stepped forward, his hands stayed in his pockets, like his whole body was apologizing. "I just wanted a glass of water." He didn't say much else. Sophie turned without a word and came back with a cup of water. And next to it, a fresh pastry. Not out of pity. Not because he looked sad, but because something in the way he stood there, still, small, unsure, made it impossible for her to turn away. What the boy didn't know was that this one small act would begin to change his entire life. And what Sophie didn't realize was that in trying to help a stranger, she was quietly saving her own heart too. Before we go further, if you believe kindness can begin with something small, drop a like to let us know. And if you think a single loaf of bread can change someone's fate, take a guess. What do you think happens the third time the boy comes back? He came back. Same time, every morning, 7:15 sharp, didn't order, didn't ask, didn't even look at the menu. He just took the same seat by the window where the first light of morning barely touched the edge of the table. In front of him, a glass of water and whatever pastry Sophie had set down before he arrived. Some days it was cinnamon swirl. Others a butter-warm croissant. She didn't ask. He didn't speak. They moved past each other like people who'd known one another forever, but never once exchanged names. Silent, steady, almost sacred. But inside, both of them were holding something back. For the boy, it was a quiet fear. What if that kindness was just a one-time thing? What if one day he came and the seat was gone? What if he was 1 minute too late and the magic disappeared? Every time he pushed open that door, his chest tightened, eyes scanning the room, as if checking whether he still belonged. And for Sophie, she never asked where he came from, never pressed for a name. But some mornings, when his eyes lingered just a second too long, like he wanted to say something but couldn't, she felt it. A pull, a wondering. Should I ask? Should I know where he sleeps in case he ever doesn't show up one day? But then, Those eyes, grateful but guarded. They didn't say, "Please notice me." They whispered, "Don't ask." And Sophie understood. Sometimes kids like him aren't afraid of hunger. They're afraid of being dragged into the light, where questions come fast and judgment even faster. So she thought, if one pastry a day can keep him here, safe, unseen, untouched, then maybe silence is the only shelter he has left. And with that, she went back to the kitchen. No questions, no changes, just another warm loaf and the quiet. Until one day, Sophie's sister noticed. She pulled Sophie aside, lowered her voice, but it still cut sharp. "You're just giving that boy free food? How long is this going to go on? What about ingredients? Labor? He looks like that. Customers won't want to come back." Sophie didn't answer right away. She just inhaled, deep and slow. Then looked her sister straight in the eye, voice low, measured, but unshakable. "We were hungry once too. Do you remember standing outside that fry cart? No one gave us anything. Maybe you were too little to remember. But I remember the day I dug through a trash bin behind the market, just for something someone else didn't finish. And I've never forgotten how people looked at us that day, like we weren't even human." Her sister stood silent, didn't speak, didn't argue. But for the first time, her eyes weren't just worried. They softened, as if remembering something she had buried a long time ago. The next morning, Sophie got up earlier than usual, still made bread, but this time, she picked the best one, wrapped it in wax paper with tiny floral patterns, tied a green ribbon around it, and placed it on the corner table, just before 7:15. Everyone in the bakery saw. A staff member opened their mouth, then closed it. A regular shook their head but turned away. No one said a word, but no one stopped her either, because sometimes kindness doesn't need approval. It just needs space to exist without being broken. But what happens when that silence starts to crack? Rain. Not the soft kind, the kind that cuts through sleeves like needles. The boy still hadn't said his name, sat outside, back hunched, one hand holding a soaked paperback, the other trying to wipe it dry with a sleeve that had already given up. His hair was drenched. One shoe barely held on by the sole. Sophie saw him, from behind the foggy window. She didn't say a word. She took off her apron, and for the first time in years, she ran out into the rain. No coat, no umbrella. Only her hands, holding a small folded umbrella and a warm butter biscuit, fresh from the oven. She set the umbrella down by his usual chair, placed the pastry on the table, said nothing, didn't even look at him, just turned back inside. But then, something made her stop. She went behind the counter, reached into the bottom of an old basket. Her fingers brushed against something soft, a gray wool beanie, slightly worn but clean, still faintly scented with fabric soap. It was her son's hat, from his last winter, not store-bought, handmade. Stitch by stitch, knit one night when he'd asked, "Mom, I want something warm, but soft, like your hugs." Sophie walked back outside, placed the hat gently beside the pastry. No explanation, no insistence. And then, silently, she walked back in. And from inside, she never looked back. But she listened to the sound of rain falling on the empty chair. Outside, the boy looked at the biscuit, the umbrella, the knit hat. His face was still cold, but his eyes red. He sat down, didn't eat right away, just lowered his head, like it was the first time in his life someone had trusted him, with no questions asked. And then, slowly, he started eating. Small bites. Fast but careful. By the third bite, he coughed, swallowed too fast. The glass of water was already there. Sophie had left it, quietly. He drank it in one gulp, as if afraid the warm biscuit would vanish before he could finish. Before leaving, he placed something on the table, a neatly folded napkin. Sophie picked it up, unfolded it. Just one line, scrawled in pencil, shaky but clear. "My name is Noah." The name made her pause. Not because it was special, but because, in a world full of closed doors and quiet wounds, the boy had led her one step closer. The next morning, reality knocked louder. A man at the counter, older, loud, watched Sophie place another pastry without charging. He scoffed. "So you're feeding him for free now? What happens when you can't pay rent?" The rumor spread fast. Local gossip boards lit up with photos of the bakery. Tiny shop doing charity? Or a PR stunt no one asked for? Some regulars began avoiding the place. A few stopped at the window, then turned away. And just like that, kindness started to feel like a risk. Sophie's sister said nothing, But the worry in her eyes was loud, not worry for Noah, but for her sister, who once again was gambling on kindness, something this world rarely forgives. A young staff whispered once, "It's like she's trying to make up for someone who's no longer here." There was no answer. But those who worked there remembered it was the first time they saw Sophie's hands tremble, holding a cup of coffee. Few knew Sophie once lost her only child in an accident. It was raining, just like this, and her son was waiting, but no one came. The seat where Noah always sat once belonged to another little boy, a boy Sophie couldn't save. She never moved the chair, not because of the wood, but because it held an apology she never got the chance to say. Later, Noah's father would share something Sophie didn't expect. He told me he stood outside the bakery for days, just watching you. Said you reminded him of his grandma, the last person who ever cooked for him. What Sophie didn't expect was that the next day, Noah disappeared. And what she couldn't stop wondering was, if a boy has vanished once, will he ever come back again? He didn't come. Not that morning. It was December. No snow, no rain, just cold, the kind that made your breath think twice before showing up. 7:15 a.m. The bell on the bakery door chimed like it always did. But it wasn't him. Sophie still walked to the window seat, still placed the same croissant, golden, crisp edges dusted with sugar on the table Noah always sat at. This time, it just sat there. Steam faded, the chair stayed empty. By evening, she wrapped the croissant carefully, not to throw away, just to keep, in case it still belonged to someone. The next morning, Noah didn't show, or the next, or the one after that. A week passed, then two. No goodbye. No phone number, no address, no clue. Just one thing remained. Every morning at 7:10, Sophie still placed a croissant on the table. Same table, same hope. She asked herself more than once, should I look for him? But every time, she stopped short. Because some disappearances don't need chasing. Some just need waiting. She was scared, not of what happened, but of what might if she broke the silence. What if Noah never came back? What if some stories needed to be told only by the one who lived them? That night, as the bakery lights dimmed, her sister said softly, not judging, just tired, "See? They always disappear, the moment you start to care." Sophie didn't answer. She just tightened her grip on the pastry box in her hands. Her eyes didn't look out, they looked in. The next morning, same table, same croissant, same waiting. But this time, she slipped a small note beneath the plate, one line, written by hand, "If you ever come back, I'll still be here." But deep inside, one quiet question remained. If he vanished once without warning, would he really come back again? Christmas Eve. The bakery closed early. Outside, the quiet street lay under a soft coat of snow. Warm yellow lights glowed through the windows. Sophie was wiping down a table when the old TV in the corner flickered to life. Local news. Holiday segment. Letters to Santa, wishes from our town. The post picked up a pale cream envelope, scrawled handwriting, unmistakably a child's. He paused after the first line, then read slowly, "Dear Santa, I don't want toys. I just want Dad to come home soon. And if it's okay, could I have a mom like the lady at the bakery? She never asks me anything, but I always leave with a full belly. One time I was really cold, and she left a gray knit hat next to my plate. She has a tiny American flag on the counter, just like the one Dad kept in his room. I think she understands people who don't have anyone, and she never makes me feel like I should be pitied. If God is real, please don't let her be alone on Christmas Eve." The boy who asked for water. The newsroom fell silent. The anchor folded the letter gently with both hands, and across the screen 2 hashtags appeared. "Somebody feed Hope the baker from our town." No one signed it. No return address. But there was only one place in town with a window table, where a warm pastry always waited, and sometimes a gray knit hat. Sophie stood at the window for a long time, still holding the rag she hadn't finished using. But her heart, it felt like someone had just touched it. Softly. Right where she thought it had frozen over. For good. The next morning, outside the bakery, someone left a small paper bag. Inside, a traditional gingerbread cookie, glazed in white, resting on a green napkin. Taped to the front, "For the woman this whole town is thinking about." No one said it out loud, but everyone knew. The letter was for her. What Sophie didn't know was that letter had gone far, farther than she ever imagined. And it wouldn't just bring the boy back, it would bring something else too. Something no one saw coming. Early morning, the bakery lights flicked on. The smell of rising dough hadn't even filled the air yet, when the bell above the door gave a soft shake. And there he was. "My name's Noah." His voice was quiet but steady. A simple name. But Sophie froze, as if someone had just whispered the name of something she'd lost a long, long time ago. No torn jacket, no matted hair, just a clean boy now, neatly dressed, yet with the same eyes Sophie would never forget. Hungry, but not for food. Behind him, a man in uniform. Mud still clung to his boots, his cuffs were creased from the road, face clean-shaven, posture straight, but his eyes held both grip and release, like someone who'd been through a war and still carried softness in his chest. He stepped inside, stopped at the counter. Sophie was just turning around, holding a tray fresh from the oven. The metal hit the wood with a soft thud. She looked up. 1 second, 2. No one spoke. Noah stepped closer, looked at her, then at the pastry, still steaming on the tray. No words, no reaching, just standing there, as if he'd walked a long way just to be allowed back. The man gently rested a hand on his son's shoulder, then turned to Sophie, lowered his head. "I'm David, Noah's father, and I don't know where to begin to thank you." Sophie didn't speak. Her eyes drifted to the tray. A croissant. Golden edges, crisp flakes, butter rising warm in the air. The same kind she used to place quietly by the window, but today it didn't feel like just a pastry. What moved her wasn't just the return. It was the father's eyes. Like he'd finally found the one place in the world safe enough to leave his son, and all the guilt he brought home with him. But what stopped Sophie cold was how he looked at her next. Like he was about to tell a story that only silence could carry. The crowd had left. The bakery returned to its quiet rhythm, just Sophie, David, and the soft crackle of bread rising in the oven. He stood for a moment, as if rearranging pieces of a story he never thought he'd speak out loud. Then he sat, hands resting gently on the edge of the old wooden table. "My wife left the day I got deployed. She took Noah with her, but then left him with someone else. He stayed with the man she moved in with, not like a son. He told me the only meal he got each day was someone's leftover plate. But the worst part wasn't the hunger. It was the look in that man's eyes, like Noah didn't exist. And his mom never called me, never asked if he'd reached out. She was too busy with the new baby." David paused. His eyes followed the ticking clock on the wall, as if anchoring himself against a wave rising in his throat. Then he continued. "One day Noah took a bus back to our old home. The house was locked. No one lived there anymore. He didn't tell me what had happened. He only called once and asked, 'Dad, when are you coming home?' He knew I couldn't. I was still deployed. He didn't want me to worry. He crashed on a friend's couch, ate what he could find. Even took bread from a dumpster once, behind a grocery store. Eventually, he found an abandoned warehouse nearby. And that's where he slept, every night." David turned to Sophie, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. Steady, honest, and breaking just a little. "He told me the light from your bakery window was the only thing that felt like home. He didn't come in at first, just stood there, watching, until he saw you didn't chase anyone away. So he tried, and he stayed." David reached into his jacket, pulled out a small piece of paper, creased, softened at the edges, worn from too many folds, and too many nights gripped too tightly. He laid it gently on the table. "This is the letter he wrote to Santa. Never told me about it. I only found out when they read it on the news." His voice lowered, not quiet because of fear, but the weight of something finally said aloud. "He didn't just ask me to come home. He wrote, 'Please don't let me be left behind again.'" Sophie said nothing. She simply stood, walked to the oven, pulled out the first cinnamon roll of the morning, edges golden, steam rising soft and slow. She placed it on a plate, no words, just placed it in front of him. Not as a gesture, not as charity, but as a promise, from someone who had once arrived too late and now refused to ever be late again. In the warm light of morning she looked at him. Her eyes didn't tear up, but something inside her cracked, a soft collapse of silence meeting understanding, a grief unspoken, and a hope rekindled. What Sophie didn't know was that their story, this quiet moment, was about to echo far beyond this little town. Late December. A quiet Ohio town, snow rested lightly on rooftops, soft as powdered sugar. The morning felt still, so still you could hear Sophie's keys click in the bakery lock. Then, the low growl of engines. 4 black military SUVs rolled to a stop outside. Doors opened in perfect sequence. Boots hit snow. One by one, uniformed soldiers stepped out, pressed, composed, solemn. The man in front carried a small wooden case and a neatly folded American flag. He paused at the entrance and spoke. Not loudly, but with a weight that made the cold air hold its breath. "We are from the 82nd Airborne Division, the unit of Sergeant David, father of Noah. We're here to honor someone who fulfilled a promise that a soldier couldn't keep on his own." A crowd began to gather. Neighbors, regulars. The local news crew had arrived. Red lights on, mics extended into the snow. A young mother stepped forward, her son in her arms. He heard the letter on the radio. That night, he wouldn't sleep until he packed a box of toys. For here. An elderly man placed fresh flowers on the bakery steps. A little girl peeked from behind her mom, leaving a folded paper note shaped like a loaf of bread. The lead soldier opened the wooden box. Inside, a metal challenge coin, engraved with the unit's name. A folded American flag, and a large letter, covered in dozens of handwritten signatures. "Thank you for being the home front we never knew we had." He placed them all gently on the bakery counter, then turned to face the others and called out, "Honor salute." Every soldier lifted their hand in perfect sync, a formal salute, a rare tribute for a civilian. The air was still. Then applause, soft at first, then rising like a wave breaking in the cold. Someone wiped a tear. Someone else quietly hit record. Behind the counter, Sophie stood frozen, both hands gripping her towel, eyes dry, but red. And somewhere in her chest, something eased, like warm bread rising in a winter oven. She stepped forward, stopped beside the soldier who had just saluted, then nodded. One by one, she looked each of them in the eye, a quiet thank you in every glance. And then, "If you're not in a rush, please come inside. Today, every loaf is a thank you." A young soldier blinked, caught off guard, then smiled. The entire group stepped into the bakery, as if returning to a place that once promised they'd be welcomed home. A reporter moved in, mic raised. "Ma'am, did you know you've inspired an entire nation?" Sophie didn't answer right away. She simply smiled, then said softly, just loud enough for those closest to hear, "I think anyone here would have done the same." She turned back to the counter, wiped it clean, like getting ready for the next batch. That same morning, a new wooden sign was placed outside the shop, "Where kindness is baked fresh every morning." And online, the hashtag #TheHappyLoaf began to appear. Then multiply, like embers catching fire in the snow. But something even more unexpected was already rising behind that counter. Because the boy who once said nothing was finally ready to speak. Not just with words, but with something far more lasting. Sophie and David didn't say much, just a quiet nod each morning. One turned on the oven, the other wiped the counter, and in between them stood Noah. Flour on his hands, eyes steady, a little taller now, still wearing the gray knit beanie, slightly too big but warm all the same, the one Sophie once left beside his plate on a rainy morning. A week later, the bakery got a new name. No press release, no ribbon cutting, just a small wooden sign by the front window, "The Happy Loaf," and beneath it, in chalk, "Where kindness is baked fresh every morning." The local news re-aired the Christmas letter. Within hours, a regular customer came back, quietly left a large tip on the counter. Someone else posted online, "I was wrong to call it a PR stunt. She's the real thing." The town began to return. No fanfare, no apologies, just more loaves sold, more napkins scribbled with thank yous. People didn't just come to buy bread anymore. They brought toy boxes, children's coats, sealed envelopes with soft corners. A retired man left a folded note, "I was once that hungry kid." A young mom wrote, "Thank you for reminding me, giving doesn't need permission." And then, one quiet afternoon, the man who once criticized her returned. He stood still for a moment, then placed a thick envelope on the counter. "I was wrong. You made me remember. My mother used to cook for the whole block during a winter. None of us thought we'd survive." Sophie didn't say a word, just smiled, soft and warm, like steam rising from fresh bread. A few weeks later, the Happy Loaf started something new. A A quiet little corner of the counter, marked by a handwritten sign, "Take if you're hungry, give if you can." Customers could buy an extra loaf to leave behind. No questions, no judgment, just trust. And the one who ran the whole thing was Sophie's sister. The same woman who once doubted. Now she showed up early, managed the donation rack with quiet pride, as if making up for all the mornings she never asked why. And the man who once complained, he now brought children's books, stacked them beside the loaves every week. News of the happy loaf traveled farther than anyone imagined. Other bakeries across the country started posting the same sign, "Take if you're hungry, give if you can." On Instagram, thousands of people shared their loaves with one caption, "Inspired by the happy loaf." And that window seat, the one Sophie never moved after her son passed, was now where Noah sat every morning. Same seat, same light. Only now, it breathed again. Noah would sit with a stack of labels, flour on his fingers, carefully handwrite each one before taping it to the paper bag. One morning he turned to Sophie. "Can I put my name on this one?" She nodded. He wrote, "Made by someone who was once hungry, for someone who is." Noah pulled his gray knit cap down over his forehead, then sat up straighter. His hands, dusted with flour, moved steadily across the labels, as if rewriting the childhood he never got to finish, with the only warmth he was ever given. On Sophie's apron there was an old army button. No one asked why. Next to it hung a simple cross necklace. Two things, seemingly unrelated. But for the people in town, they were proof that some wounds could be healed with bread, with silence, and with being seen. One quiet afternoon when the bakery was empty, David placed the necklace on the counter. His voice was soft, but every word landed. "The day I enlisted, my mom gave me this. Told me to keep it close to my heart, so I'd always know where home was. Later I passed it on to my son, in case I didn't make it back and never got to tell him anything at all." And she said, "If someone ever gives him a real home, that person deserves to keep it. You do." Sophie didn't say a word, just nodded, then gently laid the necklace beside the army button. At the corner table, Noah looked on. Quiet, then smiled, not with hunger, but with peace. 1 year later, on Christmas Eve, the town held its first ever Hope Loaf Day. Each person brought a loaf of bread and a story to the little bakery that had once saved just one child, and somehow ended up healing the whole town. Noah, now a teenager, still labeled every loaf each morning, and under every line he wrote was a name of someone who once went hungry, now giving back. That afternoon, after the crowd had left, he sat beside Sophie, a blank label in his hand. He hesitated, then turned to her. "Miss Sophie, can I bake some of the bread this year? To give away, like you used to give to me?" Sophie didn't answer right away. She just reached behind her and handed him the old apron. No words, just a quiet handoff. In that small kitchen they began mixing dough for the first batch of the next season. Your turn. If a stranger has ever done something kind for you, even something small, share that moment in the comments. If you were once the hungry kid or the woman who quietly reached out, we'd love to hear your story. And if something in this story moved you, maybe Sophie's silence, the seat by the window, or the flour-covered hands labeling hope, tell us where you're watching from, and whether there's a bakery like this in your heart. Type bread if you believe that one loaf, offered at the right time, in the right hands, can save a childhood. And don't forget to hit subscribe, so these stories of quiet kindness can keep finding the ones who need them most.